Chapter 19. Galbadian Missile Base. The supply train from Delling City to the D-District prison was an older model because the newer engines couldn't handle all the sand from the desert. It was already half unloaded by the Galbadian soldiers manning it when Squall pulled their stolen vehicle behind the station.
"Are we sneaking aboard?"
Rinoa asked from the passenger seat. It would take them back to Delling, and from there they could take a train to Timber, then to Balam.
Let's just take it,"
he said, deciding to skip both middlemen and drive it straight to Balam.
"We're stealing a train."
Rinoa laughed.
"Yeah, sure, why not?"
he shrugged, standing from the car. The three of them made their way around the back of the train, out of sight, running up towards the front. As they spotted the engine, Squall reached for his gun blade, which was unnecessary as the Galbadian soldier manning the controls jumped out and began walking away before they needed to knock him out to take it. The engine was already running, prepared to pull out since the soldiers had no desire to linger here after the supplies were unloaded. The three of them didn't even need to turn it on. Squall was happy he was finally getting some good luck. Squall stepped up to the controls and looked them over quickly. He had never driven a train before, but how difficult could it be? They couldn't get off the rails. And for the convenience of whatever soldier was playing conductor that day, all the controls were labeled. That made throwing the driving lever up to max rather easy. The half-unloaded train responded to him easily. The old engine was no less effective for being mostly outdated. It responded readily to Squall's direction and started pulling away rather quickly. Even with the large weight behind it, the supply train was rather fast.
"Hey! Stop!"
Zell and Rinoa both turned at the same time to look over the side of the engine rails to watch the lone Galbadian soldier chasing them down.
"Hey, Squall,"
Zell pointed,
"some dork is coming after us."
Squall didn't react.
"Stop the train!"
the soldier yelled, trying to make himself go faster. He cried out in the effort it was taking to keep up with the gradually speeding up locomotive.
"Sorry!"
Rinoa yelled out.
"This guy's good,"
Zell admired. Squall continued to say nothing. The soldier's foot caught against a rock in the packed dirt and he cried out as he face-planted. Zell and Rinoa flinched as he crashed and faded away.
"Sorry, it's an emergency,"
Rinoa called after him.
"Nice try, sport,"
Zell shook his head sadly. Aside from him, there was no one to stop them from moving. And by train Balam was very close. Squall knew he wasn't going to make it. His hands were shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and pain. Pain worsened by the shaking because of his fractured wrists.
"Zell,"
Squall called out. He and Rinoa turned back to him.
"Can you take the controls? I need to go rest."
Zell and Rinoa froze, then shared a wide-eyed look. Squall was admitting that he needed rest? Rinoa looked back to him at the controls. Instead of feeling relieved that he was finally asking for a chance to lay down, she actually felt concerned. How far to the edge had he been pushed that he was admitting that he needed to stop for even a moment?
"It's not difficult,"
Squall said, turning when he didn't say anything.
"There's a map right there at the top of the panel. You can control the rail switches from here." "Oh, yeah,"
Zell said quickly, stepping forward.
"You go knock out, I got this."
Squall nodded and moved back so Zell could step forward. He turned from the controls and jumped from the train engine to the next car. Rinoa and Zal shared another look. Then Rinoa turned and followed after Squall. The half-empty supply car still had a few crates within it. Between the choice of the hard metal ground and the slightly less hard wooden crates, Squall made up his mind easily. He was already climbing down onto a low crate when she walked in. She stared as he laid back.
"What are you doing?"
She frowned.
"Sleeping,"
he answered shortly.
"On a wooden box. See any other better options?"
His eyes were already closed, his body laid out like he was dead. He didn't even use his hands as a small cushion. Honestly, his wrists hurt so badly that he didn't want to put pressure on them. He knew those were some of the bones that had cracked during the torture. Rinoa stared at him for a few seconds before making her decision.
"Sit up."
His eye cracked to look at her as she stepped in closer.
"Sit up for a second,"
she repeated. Squall tried not to groan, he was so tired even the wood was comfortable, but he sat up. He watched as Rinoa sat down on the crate behind him and leaned back against the metal wall. She spent a couple seconds wiping off her lap before patting it invitingly.
"Okay. Lay down."
Squall looked up from her lap to her face.
"What are you doing?" "That was an order,"
she grinned, patting her thighs again.
"An order from your client?" "You know, there is an exception for obeying all orders written into the garden bylaws when it comes to sexual harassment." "Stop being difficult,"
Rinoa laughed. She reached out and grabbed his forehead with her hand. She knew that she couldn't move him if he didn't wish it. So either he was weak from exhaustion to the point of being pushed around by her, or he allowed it. Either way, she laid his head back against her lap. He didn't fight her. He didn't want to admit how soft her thighs were or how intoxicating her scent was. Not her perfume, that had long since faded in the prison. Just the scent of her.
"There, isn't that better?"
she asked, laying one hand on his chest. With the other, she reached up and gently stroked his hair back from his face. He would never admit it out loud. Rinoa didn't speak for a long few minutes. She watched his face as his breathing evened out and his muscles relaxed slightly. His facial expression didn't change though. It was like he was guarded and thinking even when he was sleeping. Sitting still like this though, Rinoa could finally look his body over for damage. "Tortured?" Rinoa had asked Quistis in the car, unable to help herself. He had been chained up against an electricity generator when they found him. Despite that, he had still stood up and helped them bust out of the prison. How strong could one person be? And it was Cypher that had done it. The same Cypher that Rinoa had once admired. The one she had mourned and attempted to avenge. He had been the force pulling the lever.
"I'm sorry,"
she whispered to Squall, touching his hair. Even with the sand and grit, the brown locks were softer than she would have guessed. They were probably one of the few soft parts about him. He chose to live a very hard life and had himself become hard as a consequence. But torture? Hot guilt filled her body as she finally had a chance to relax a bit.
"I'm so sorry,"
she said again, shaking her head. He would probably wave her apology away if he were awake, so this was the only time she would get to tell him.
"I didn't know. I couldn't believe he would be capable of something like that,"
she continued whispering to avoid waking him.
I always knew he was cocky and arrogant, but I never really thought he was a bad guy. Is that a bad excuse? Maybe I just have poor taste in men. I seem to keep wanting to go for guys I know my father won't like.
She lifted her head.
We met last summer in Delling City when he was on vacation from Garden. He's the one who helped me run away from home. He was my escort to Timber.
She couldn't help herself, she grinned at the memories.
He always seemed so strong to me. Like he was on an unattainable level. And the way he talked, it really made you feel like you could do anything. Like only the sky was the limit.
Rinoa had to blink back tears. She felt almost like she was mourning his death again. And, in a way, she was. She was mourning the man that could have been.
When I was with him, I felt like nothing could touch me. Every time we met a monster on the way to Timber, he would turn to me and yell, "Get back, Rinoa. I'll protect you." Or something to that effect. It was all so gallant and exciting. He gave me such confidence, you know? I joined the Forest Owls using that confidence he gave me. Really felt like I could make a difference.
She frowned.
And I took on the sorceress by myself using that confidence he gave me. I don't even think she looked at me. That was how easy it was for her to take me down. I realized then just how powerless I was. Just how little that confidence he gave me amounted to when it came right down to it. Because of course bad things could happen to me. And no one can be around to protect you forever. His confidence was just waiting to get me into trouble.
Rinoa's eyes focused back on Squall's sleeping face.
With you, Squall, I never felt confident. Not even once. I've been scared since we started traveling together. Even before that. Because you never told me to stand back and to let you protect me. Do you remember what you said to me instead? You said, "Come here, Rinoa. Let me show you how to fight this thing." You got me a GF. You gave me magic. You showed me how to use it. And it was those skills I used to break into the prison. I was terrified and uncertain and as far from confident as I could be. But suddenly I knew how to fight and how to cast spells. I have my guardian and my weapon. And each guard that came at us made me realize more and more that I knew what I was doing. I had gotten myself into trouble, but you had given me the skills to get out of it. You gave me the ability to build my own confidence. What you gave me, Squall, was worth so much more. Because I know now that what Cypher gave me wasn't confidence at all. It was bravado. It was a false sense of confidence that came from no place to back it up. He wanted to be stronger than me. Wanted to protect me. Wanted me to be completely dependent on him. You just don't think like that. You gave me what I needed, even if it wasn't necessarily what I wanted. I know I'm not as strong as you, but I've never felt so strong in my life. I know I can depend on you to help me, but I also know I can depend on myself. So, thank you. Thank you for giving me the one thing that no one else has ever trusted me with, me.
Rinoa let out a shuddering breath.
I guess that's what makes it so hard though. Everything you've given me. And it was Cypher who. I just feel so guilty. I feel like this is somehow my fault. Don't.
She gasped at the single word that came from Squall's mouth.
Squall. You don't have to feel guilty.
His mouth was moving, but his eyes remained shut.
I thought you were sleeping.
She cried, her face flaming red.
How can I sleep when you're talking to me?
There was no heat in his voice as he said it. Like he was merely pointing out a fact.
I'm sorry,
Rinoa said quickly.
I'll stop talking. Just go back to sleep.
He didn't say anything else and neither did Rinoa. She just continued looking at him, wondering just how much of that he had heard. Or if he had ever fallen asleep in the first place. Distances were deceiving in the desert. The missile base that had looked so close from the fork in the road was actually quite a ways away. So far, in fact, that all three of them in the vehicle had time to change into the spare Galbadian army uniforms that they had found in the back. Even accounting for how fast Quistis and Selfie had changed while keeping an eye on Irvine as he drove because they didn't trust him not to peek. Selfie was back at the wheel when they pulled up at the entry gate. All three of them had their new uniforms on over their own clothes and were trying not to show how uncomfortable the military garb was. It felt like they had been made from the cheapest fabrics and metals available. Which, knowing the Galbadian army, was probably true. The guard at the checkpoint barely glanced into the window of the RV.
All right, go ahead,
he said before flipping a switch in the booth that lowered the metal gate barring their way. Really? Selfie looked surprised at how easy that was. He hadn't even asked for ID. The parking lot of the missile base was filled with a few other jeeps and RVs. Selfie pulled theirs into a spare spot and the three of them jumped out. As they were moving to the back of the car, someone on a loudspeaker was calling out.
The launch against Trabia Garden has been completed successfully. Prepare for the launch on Balam Garden. All personnel, take your positions.
Selfie scratched at the neck of her uniform. This uniform was itchy. And smelly. Did no one in this army care for the basics? Irvine was turning a white card in his fingers as he and Quistis moved in closer.
How long until the launch?
Quistis asked, looking around. She didn't know how long it would take to reload the next round of missiles.
It doesn't matter,
Selfie said firmly.
We just stop the missiles, that's all there is to it, right? We do this quick and we do this loud. If there's a door, we go in. If there's anything we can break, we break. And, in the end, we blow this place to smithereens. Hey, Selfie,
Irvine grinned at her as he slipped the card back in his pocket.
I like your attitude. Let's do it upright.
Selfie nodded eagerly.
Let's get a move on. We've got some havoc to wreak.
They followed Selfie to the entrance. The small entry room was, surprisingly, a better guard than the actual guard outside at the gate. When Selfie pressed the touch screen by the door to open it, it blinked to her angrily and refused to move.
It's locked.
She stomped her foot in irritation. Her eyes moved over to the second door and moved over to try that one. It didn't try to block her out, but it did give up a prompt screen.
Insert ID card.
She read off, frowning.
But we don't have one.
Like the screen was somehow wrong for demanding it of her.
Selfie, calm down,
Quistis told her, in instructor mode.
You yelling is going to accomplish nothing. Let's just work our way around it. Or we could use this,
Irvine said, pulling out the white card he had been playing with it.
Where did you get that?
Quistis frowned.
Found it in the car. Give it a try.
Selfie beamed as she nearly snatched it from his fingers. She turned and slid the card through the ID slot. The computer read it for a second. Verifying. Access granted.
Hoo-hoo.
Selfie threw up her hands excitedly. The door slid open easily and the three of them filed inside the missile base. The entire place smelled of oil and sweat and gunpowder. The metal walkway they found themselves moving across echoed around them along with the sounds of motors and metal hitting metal. Selfie paused as she spotted someone standing guard by a door. He was standing still, staring off at nothing, and hadn't noticed them yet. She let out a breath.
Okay. Just act casual. We totally belong here. We are not suspicious.
Quistis and Irvine nodded and fell in line behind the tiny Selfie as they started moving. The door guys looked over to them as they walked by. In perfect sync. In one line. They were seeds. They fell into military formation a great deal more easily than any Galbadian soldier.
Hey, you! Stop right there!
Selfie flinched and grimaced as she came up short. Holy Hein, had they looked that suspicious? They barely even made it inside the door before being found out.
Ha!
The guard nodded, satisfied as he looked them over.
Walking in single file. Your parents must have raised you well. That's very good manners. Always be thankful to your parents for bringing you up. Yes, sir.
Selfie replied automatically as she tried to wrap her mind around what he had just said and how little sense he had made. Was he serious? What a strange man.
What a character,
Irvine snickered after they turned a corner and started heading through an S-shaped walkway down towards the next level. Quistis's eyes were caught by what looked like a large machine in the background covered in a tarp.
This army is so undisciplined,
Selfie shook her head.
Don't complain about something that works out in your favor,
Quistis grinned, turning away from whatever machine they were building.
What's the plan?
Selfie shrugged.
Let's just see where this leads us.
The S-shaped catwalk ended in a flight of stairs that came to a small area that held a door guarded by a bored-looking guy playing with his fingernails and a smaller staircase that was guarded by a guard that was counting something off on his fingers, his mouth moving silently. Irvine and Selfie shared a glance as they turned past the stairs and ended up in a large cargo bay where they could see the missiles being loaded. Two men were standing by the rails operating the devices that controlled the missile movement. Selfie moved closer to them, wondering if she could knock them out and take those controls. How bad would it be for the plan if she threw them over the rail and let them fall to their deaths, steal the controls, then take control herself?
Hey!
One of the guys glanced over at her as she came in closer.
I'm busy now, what do you want?
Selfie dithered, uncertain what to say. She was saved by the second guy who frowned as he lowered his controller.
Oh, yeah. Aren't we suppository to inspect the circuit room today? Ugh, is it that time of month already?
The first guy groaned.
We're kind of busy today, in case you haven't noticed. We don't have time to do that right now. So you would rather take the pay cut when they find out we didn't do it? You know the brass is always looking for a chance not to pay us. Even with a good excuse, they'll still nail us for not doing our jobs.
The first guy groaned and Selfie wondered, not for the first time, how this army could continue to operate. It was a good thing joining was mandatory or no one would do so. She shared a look with Irvine and his grin told her that he was thinking the same thing, even if she couldn't see his eyes through their helmets. The first maintenance guy sighed and looked at her.
Sorry to trouble you, but could you deliver a message for us? Tell the guys by the missile launcher to go on ahead with the inspection and that we'll catch up with them later. Thanks a lot, we really appreciate it.
Thanks, the other one said as well, throwing out his hand dismissively as they returned to their controls. They hadn't even given them a chance to say no. Selfie shrugged and turned to go follow the order. Not because she had to, but because she figured that it would get her further than openly defying it. The missile control room was behind the door that was guarded by the guy picking his fingernails. He didn't even glance up as they passed by. He was either so fixated on his task or he just didn't care. It was hard to tell, honestly. The man in charge in the missile control room was writing something down on the tablet he had tucked into his arm when Selfie entered. She stopped in front of him and saluted him in the Galbadian style, side of the hand to her forehead.
"Excuse me, sir,"
she said, catching his attention.
"I have a message for you." "Well? What it is?" "It's from the maintenance team about inspecting the circuit room. They said they were too busy right now, so that you should go on ahead with it and they would catch up."
"Oh, okay," the guy frowned, looking back at the missiles he was trying to load.
"But I'm still not done here. They're not the only busy ones, you know. It's not like we can skip inspection though." "Hey, could you tell them I can't go yet either? Thanks, I appreciate it." He waved her off and Selfie turned again. Was this what being in the Galbadian arm was like? Sent on pointless errands like this? Surely there was a grunt for this work. For all these people knew, she could be their SO. The maintenance guys were still working when Selfie got back. She saluted them and delivered her message that the other guy was too busy as well. "Ah, geez,"
the first guy groaned.
"Now what do we do? Guess we have no choice but to go?"
The second guy frowned. The two of them stared off into the depths of the loading bay for a long moment. Selfie and the others shared a look as they thought it over. So were they going to go or not? Who was even running this military? The first soldier's head dropped back before looking over to them again. He seemed to consider something for a second.
"All right. Can we ask you three to go in our place?" "What?"
The second guy jumped.
"Hey, that's not cool. What if the base commander finds out?" "Oh, it'll be fine,"
he waved away his concern.
"Look, it's easy. A monkey could do it. Just make sure all the blinky green lights are green and all the non-blinky blue lights are blue. If you see any yellow or red, I don't know, hit it or something." "Dude, relax. When have we ever seen a yellow or red light?"
The other guy grumbled uncomfortably. But he didn't appear to want to actually abandon his current duties to do it either.
"Well, I hope you're right." "Of course I am. So, that's that. We're counting on you." "Yes, sir."
Selfie saluted him, trying with a great deal of difficulty to hide her grin. She turned and stuck out her tongue to the others. "Blowing this place to smithereens." "Who?" The circuit room was behind the weird guy. He was humming to himself as they made their way back to where he was standing. He was even rocking back and forth in place. Selfie couldn't help but wonder how old he was. He either had to be too young for this army or too old. Honestly, neither one was a good thing. She saluted him all the same as she came in close.
"The maintenance team asked us to take their place with the inspection." "Oh, really?"
The other guy grinned.
"Sweet. Then I guess my shift is over. I'm gonna call in my relief. You can go on ahead with the inspection."
Then he just left. left 3 unknown, unqualified people in charge of inspecting what was quite literally the power station of this entire place. Selfie was giggling to herself, trying to bring to mind Quistis's advice about not questioning the folly of her enemies as they stepped inside. She put her hands to her hips as the 3 of them looked around. The power core was humming behind a pane of glass to their right. There was a large control panel directly in front of them filled with blinky green and non-blinky blue lights. Irvine walked over to the glass and tapped it experimentally.
"Bulletproof," he reported. "Can't break through to the power core from here." "Then let's tamper with it from there,"
Quistis pointed to the control panel. Selfie stepped up to the console and touched it. It flickered to life and waited for a command prompt from her. She dithered before just typing some random stuff. She didn't really know from computers, so she didn't really expect much. But she expected something. The menu changed, but nothing really happened.
She frowned at it. "Oh, whatever. I'm just going to break it."
She reached into the back of her uniform and pulled out the morning star she had hidden along her back. She twisted it around and started smashing it against the panel.
"Destroy everything!"
she yelled like a battle cry. Quistis stepped back quickly, covering her face to protect it from flying debris as Irvine hooted and hollered. He started egging her on eagerly.
"Really?"
Quistis looked at him dryly.
"What?"
He laughed, shrugging.
"It's not like it's our stuff. Hit that thing right there, Selfie. I bet it makes really pretty sparks."
Giggling maniacally, Selfie did so. And it did in fact make really pretty sparks. Sparks that fizzled out over the entire console and through to the power core. The humming faded away with the lights as the power core was overloaded.
"Hey!"
Selfie's voice came through the darkness.
"Hey! All the lights went out."
She sounded surprised that her abuse of the system had resulted in a meltdown.
"Electrical system malfunction. Maintenance team, investigate immediately." "I think that's our cue to get the hell out,"
Irvine said as the backup generators kicked on. The room was flooded with low-energy red light as the machines came back to life with some deep, low humming.
"It would look really bad if they found us here,"
Quistis agreed.
"All right,"
Selfie giggled, putting away her weapon.
"Next."
The 3 of them left just as the real duo from the maintenance team was running over.
"Hey, you!"
the one in front yelled.
"What the hell is going on?" "Ah, crud,"
Selfie bit her lip. "Let's see. Fight. Lie. Fight. Lie. Fight."
"We just got here,"
Selfie said, holding up hands like she was innocent.
"We have absolutely no idea what's going on." "Bite your tongue,"
the first guy snapped at her. Who still used that phrase?
"We just saw you come out of there."
Selfie dithered.
"Okay, we took a peek inside. But there were so many yellow and red lights. I tried to hit it, but everything just went insane. There's no way we can fix it." "All right then,"
the first guy nodded like that was an acceptable answer.
"Let us take care of it."
The 2 guys ran into the room and Selfie rolled her eyes.
"This army sucks."
Irvine laughed as Selfie started back in through the door.
"What's with this mess?"
one of the guys was yelling.
"Hey! What are you doing?"
the other guy asked nervously as Quistis locked the door. It barely took a few seconds. Selfie and the others were coming back out. Selfie was trying to get the blood off her hands and Quistis was stretching.
All right,
Selfie laughed.
Let's keep moving. We've got a lot more destruction to sow.
Irvine laughed nervously. Selfie could really get out of control sometimes. He didn't want to think what would happen if she turned that anger on him. He should probably be a lot more careful if he was going to keep chasing after her like this.
Now what?
He asked.
Well, with those two gone, we can take their controls in the loading bay,
Selfie said.
Let's go see what kind of trouble we can make there.
They didn't make it that far. As they were coming down off of the S-shaped catwalk, the guy in control of the missile room was stepping outside and caught sight of them and the man standing guard on their door.
Hey, could you four lend us a hand? The power's down and we need some help.
The nail inspector groaned at the prospect of work.
I guess so. Come on,
the missile controller gestured them forward. Selfie and the others followed him inside where the controller was overlooking a team of guys that was trying to push one of the large missile launchers into place. The controller frowned at them as they approached.
Hey, you know, I haven't seen you three around here before.
Selfie thought quickly.
We just got transferred? From the D District prison. Honestly, I like it better here. A lot less sand.
The controller grinned.
Ain't that the truth? Well, we need some help in here. I guess it doesn't really matter who at this point. Do you think you could lend us a hand?
Crud. Run? Fight? More lies? There was probably still more stuff to break.
Yes, sir,
Selfie smiled.
This way. Follow me. Unfreaking believable. A power failure at a crucial time like this. What the heck are those maintenance guys doing?
Currently? Well, one was shoved under a control panel leaking blood everywhere and the other one had been hog-tied with wires, knocked out, and hidden in the ceiling.
That one right there,
the controller pointed to the missile silo currently being shoved against by two guys who were making absolutely no progress.
All right, one of you get between the two of them, the other two on either side. I want this done already.
Selfie put herself in the center and the five of them spent the next few minutes grunting and groaning against the weight of the silo as they shoved it into place. To be quite honest, Selfie wasn't really trying all that hard. She honestly hoped at one point that the guy would just give up and call it off so they wouldn't have to load the missile. No such luck. They eventually wedged it in place and the three of them stepped back as the other Galbadian soldiers dropped, winded and sore from that alone.
Good work,
the controller nodded as the silo dropped into place through the floor.
All we need now is to confirm the coordinates on the control panel.
He hesitated as he looked at the other soldiers, trying in vain to catch their breath. Seriously? That thing wasn't that heavy. Selfie frowned at them.
The program should already be ready to go. You three get on it. The controller said, pointing over his shoulder.
The control panel. All right. Now they were talking. Trying not to giggle too evilly or loudly, Selfie led the others out to the control panel. It came alive at a touch and welcomed them to the program.
So, what should we do?
Quistis asked as it loaded.
So, let's just bust it up,
Irvine said like it was obvious. Yeah. Busted up real good. Selfie was already grinning as she reached for her weapon again. But she frowned as she had a new thought.
It'll be a mega bummer if we launch the missiles by mistake, she said unhappily. Even worse if they go off target and hit an innocent town of civilians. So, let's just hold back a little this time and mess around with it a bit.
Quistis and Irvine shared a surprised look as Selfie started playing with the controls. The first thing she went to was the screen to change the target, which, unfortunately, was locked to all but superior officers. Selfie frowned, but she hadn't really been expecting that they would be allowed to make that kind of change. However, they could change the error ratio. In return for a less energetic launch, they could make it so the missiles weren't quite so on target. Grinning, Selfie started messing around with that screen until she had set the error ratio for as high as she could make it. With any luck, if they couldn't stop the launch, then the missiles might just harmlessly hit away from the garden. She looked around a little more to see if she could change anything else, but everything was either locked or simply informational. She uploaded the specs on the new error ratio and stepped back with a grin of satisfaction.
All right then,
she nodded as the program closed out.
I think we've done all we can here. Come on, let's see if we can't sneak past that guy next.
The guard who had been counting on his fingers earlier was back to being stoic and unmoving as they approached him.
Sorry. This place is off limits. You're not allowed up here,
he said, his nasally voice bored.
But we've come to report on the missile coordinate data,
Selfie said innocently. Yeah, that sounded legit.
Oh, very well.
The guy grinned and pointed over his shoulder.
Go right ahead.
He stood by so they could pass. What was with everyone in this army being so brainless? They were so used to being told not to question their superiors that they stopped questioning everyone. Not for the first time, Selfie was so glad she had opted to join SEED. The guy frowned at Selfie's back. Did they always have someone that puny in their base? As the three of them climbed up to the control deck, they could hear the SO and his aides calling out to each other.
All systems go, sir. Everything is all set, sir. Phew. We had some minor setbacks, but let's proceed. We're running behind schedule, but better late than never. Prepare for the final launch phase. Roger. Roger. Attention, this is the control room. We are now entering the final phase of the missile launch. Take your designated positions and prepare for liftoff.
Selfie reached the top of the stairs and the SO looked over to her and frowned.
Hey! What are you doing in here? We've come to report on the missile coordinates,
she said, saluting him. She didn't think about it and she reflexively gave him the SEED salute instead of the Galbadian one.
Oh!
The man frowned as he watched her lower her arm.
Wait! Don't move! I thought you looked suspicious. You're the intruders. The ones behind the circuit room malfunction. No use hiding it now. That salute you just did was completely wrong.
Yikes! Selfie frowned at herself. Well, whatever. They had made it this far. She grinned at the others before reaching into her back pocket.
What are you ARGH?
The flashbang grenade that Selfie threw released a blinding light. While the Galbadian soldiers were stumbling backwards from the shock, the three of them were throwing off their borrowed uniforms and releasing their much more comfortable and familiar clothes.
Ta-da!
Selfie yelled happily despite the fact that the soldiers couldn't see.
Who? Finally! This military uniform is itchy. And it stinks.
She shivered and she finally satisfied the urge to scratch at her bare arms and legs. Quistis and Irvine, who both wore clothes from head to toe, didn't look all that bothered by it.
Bring it on!
The SO yelled as he tried to focus on them through bleached eyes.
How dare you interfere without plans? Up yours!
Selfie laughed, pulling out her morning star.
We're gonna screw up this crappy plan of yours all to hell! Get them!
The SO hollered. His aides ran forward at the same time. Laughing, Selfie leapfrogged over one of them and charged for the leader. Quistis and Irvine stepped up to deal with the two of them.
Booyaka!
Selfie yelled loudly as she swung her morning star around. The mace slammed against the gun on the SOS hand, shattering the firing mechanism.
Booyaka!
Irvine repeated, confused, as he grappled for his gun with the Galbadian soldier.
What in the name of Hein is Booyaka? It's a thing I'm trying to start,
Selfie laughed, ducking under a swing from the SO. She kicked out and slammed her heel against his side, sending him reeling.
It's like an exclamation. You know, like Hiya. Only cooler. Selfie, you can't just decide to start a thing,
Quistis told her, jerking the soldier she had captured around the neck with her whip down to the floor.
Well, I totally did, so oh. In your face.
She twirled her nunchaku around and slammed the mace end of one half into the SOS face. Irvine jerked his soldier forward and head-butted his metal helmet. Reeling, both men stepped away from each other. Irvine, having trouble focusing, lifted his shotgun again and blasted it. Even dazed, his aim was perfect. The soldier flew backward from the force.
Okay, note, do not do that again,
he said, shaking his head.
Are you mocking us?
The gagging soldier asked.
Are they from Garden?
The SO asked through a bleeding nose and mouth.
How can they already know of our plan? We're just that good,
Selfie grinned. She twisted her nunchaku out and hit him against the left temple. His body flew to the side and collapsed against the floor. Quistis jerked her whip up and slammed her captured soldier's body against the ceiling. Then jerked him down. Then to the wall. She smacked him against the floor one last time before jerked his whip back. His body bounced in place then stopped moving.
Okay then,
Selfie dusted off her hands before putting her fists to her waist and looking around the area.
We should be able to stop the missile launch from here. One of these control panels should be the launch control mechanism,
Quistis agreed.
Let's just split up and start looking,
Irvine said. The three of them split up to the nearest panels. Quistis went left, Irvine went right, and Selfie stepped forward to one of the smaller control panels. She frowned as she looked around. She couldn't find any missile control systems, only mundane things like temperature and moisture control. It was a panel for controlling banal things needed for the day-to-day running of the compound.
This isn't it,
Selfie frowned. She moved over to where Irvine was biting his tongue as he tried to navigate through his panel.
Oh, yeah, this is it,
he said, pelvic thrusting a bit in victory. Then he frowned as Selfie looked at the screen.
Oh, wait. No, this isn't it.
Selfie rolled her eyes, shaking her head.
I found it,
Quistis said, calling them over. Selfie and Irvine stepped over as Quistis quickly and effortlessly moved through the menus on the far control panel.
There. Done. The launch is cancelled. Hoo-hoo!
Selfie yelled, celebrating.
All we need to find now is self-destruct mechanism. It's not in here though. Let's check through that door.
There was a small exit in the control room into a smaller, more intimate control room. There was a single control panel here that Selfie stepped forward to use. It took her a little longer to find the emergency self-destruct program.
Hey! This is it!
She laughed.
Okay, let's see. Hey! We have to set a time? Okay. It's got a 10-minute minimum. Is that enough for us to escape? That should be enough,
Quistis nodded once. Selfie set the time and had to go through like 3 "Are you sure" screens. Then, finally.
Self-destruct mechanism, activated 10 minutes until self-destruction. All staff must evacuate the base immediately. I repeat. Hoo-hoo!
Selfie laughed.
Let's hurry on outta here.
There was an emergency exit door right in the smaller control room. It opened up easily as Selfie started to pass it. And she found herself looking out into the entry room that they had used the stolen ID card to break into. The guard that Quistis had tossed around like a toy lifted his head off of the floor. He was bleeding from the ears and he felt like one of his lungs had been punctured. He is going to die, he was more than sure of it. But he wasn't going to go alone. Grunting in pain, he crawled painful over to the launch control panel.
It's not over yet,
he laughed, reaching for the controls. A loud rumbling rocked the compound as Selfie reached for the door leading outside.
What was that noise?
She asked, looking around. Quistis shrugged. They exited quickly. Outside, everything was pandemonium. Men were scrambling to get into the few vehicles that were available. The one that Selfie had stolen was already gone. Those who weren't lucky enough to fit into a ride were just sprinting towards the open gate. The guard that had been manning had long since disappeared from his post.
Guess we gotta walk,
Irvine shrugged at the lack of vehicles.
A little walking never hurt anyone,
Selfie said, running for the gate. She would rather be as far as possible from this place when it went up, be it by walking or riding. The loud groaning of metal pulled her attention over her shoulder. Selfie's eyes went wide at the sight of the cannons aimed their way.
Duck!
Automatically, all 3 of them hit the ground. Blasts of cannon fire exploded over their heads and hit the guard booth outside of the compound. The mechanisms destroyed, the enormous metal gates that enclosed the compound slid shut. Selfie gasped as she lifted herself up. She and the others turned to see a captain and his 2 lieutenants looking at them. The blue-clad lieutenants were climbing into a large mech with 6 electrical generators pointing directly up and large cannons mounted on the front.
There's no way I'm letting you all live!
The captain yelled as he backed up into the machine himself, pointing his arm gun at them.
It would be inexcusable to Sorceress Edia. I don't want to suffer her wrath. Are you men ready? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Came the twin calls as Selfie and the others got back to their feet. Their hands were already going to their weapons as they looked over the large mech.
All right.
The captain grinned from the hatch of the mech.
Let's go.
The door slammed shut and the machine suddenly charged. Selphie cried out and dropped to the ground as Quistis and Irvine leapt to either side. She was just small enough to fit in the small space between the mech and the ground it hovered above. She could feel its machinery tugging at her hair and clothes as it passed by. The loud scrapping of metal on metal echoed loudly as it slammed into the metal gates. Selphie pushed herself back up quickly, frowning at the thing.
What is it with this army and giant mechs?
She asked no one as she jerked her morning star out of her boots and faced it.
They spend money on the most useless of things,
Quistis agreed.
Please, allow me. What? You want to fight it alone?
Irvine said, his eyebrows going up.
Don't be silly,
Quistis laughed.
I just thought I'd make it a bit easier for us. Quetzalcoatl, my dear friend. Are you ready to come out to play?
The delightful singing that was an almost constant in the back of her head raised in excitement, making her smile. Her GF was such a friendly little thing.
Fire!
The captain's voice yelled from an intercom system within.
Blizzard!
Irvine threw out a spell, erecting a shield in front of Quistis. A hail of bullets struck against the ice spell, shattering it around their feet. Quistis was very familiar with Quetzalcoatl though. She barely needed time to summon him. She blinked and her eyes flashed between bright white, yellow and blue-white. Electricity sparked from her fingertips as channeled the spell through the body of her whip. The divine power of the primal forces. The energy that human ingenuity has always tried to emulate but could never be matched. Called forth from the heavens in the ultimate display of blinding beauty and breathtaking destructing. All of the hairs on their bodies stood on end as the current traveled through their nerves. Quistis released the build-up energy in a single, devastating move.
Thunderstorm!
Quetzalcoatl was a dazzling, bird-like being that erupted from the ground like the thunder that he commanded. Only Quistis was blessed to be able to see him. Bear witness to the way the lovely creature drew in sparking energies from the earth below. Then discharged it in a lethal blast against the mech. The massive amount of energy that exploded through the generators of the mech completely decimated the circuitry. Two of the large generators on top of the body, unable to handle the incredible load, exploded and the men inside cried out.
Captain!
One of the called as Quetzalcoatl faded back into Quistis's mind.
Let's just get out of here.
The other begged.
We can't let them seize this MRV.
The captain denied them.
Why would we even want to?
Selphie snickered.
You guys are the only ones that have an obsession with enormous mechs.
She laughed and backflipped away neatly from the gunfire that started up towards her. Irvine stepped forward and blasted out a round of demo ammo directly at the muzzle of their mini-cannon. It exploded in their face and he grinned. He took another shot, but the demo ammo couldn't break through the metal chassis.
Water!
Selphie threw her spell towards the top of the mech where there were open spaces due to the exploded generators. The water from the spell dripped down and started destroying the wires and circuits. That set off another, internal wave of electricity that burned its way through the mech's systems.
That hull is tough,
Irvine frowned.
Can we only use magic against it? Actually, we only need to force the people out,
Quistis pointed out.
Thunder! Any ideas?
Selphie asked.
Water! Well, no rush, but we've only got… I'd say less than 5 minutes left. So, wouldn't that, by definition, be a rush?
Selphie frowned.
Thunderstorm!
For the second time in as many minutes, Quistis called forth the power of her GF, and the second attack was even more devastating than the first. 2 more of the generators exploded and a fire started near the engine as black smoke started billowing out. The men inside were yelling in a panic as alarms went off.
I can't control it. What?
Selfie giggled as a mixture of fire and smoke worked together to force the 3 men out of the safety of the near-impenetrable hull of the mech.
Hey, boys!
Selfie grinned at the 2 lieutenants who were the first to escape. A ear-piercing, shrill scream came from the mouth of the captain as he escaped the MRV, literally on fire and flailing in an attempt to put himself out.
Hot! Hot! Hot!
He cried as he beat the fire into submission.
That piece of crap!
Then he looked forward at the grinning seeds. Quistis tilted her head as Selfie waved.
What now, Captain?
One lieutenant asked.
It needs repairs, sir.
The other added.
We kill him first.
The captain growled, aiming his gun.
Not gonna lie,
Irvine grinned as he cocked his shotgun.
You woulda had better luck inside the burning mech.
The lieutenants looked uncomfortable as the captain grimaced. The fight was too easy. Irvine brought down the captain with a single demo ammo shot and Quistis used her whip to throw one lieutenant against the other. Selfie hadn't even needed to make a move against them.
Let's go!
She yelled at the others, putting away her nunchaku. She ran around to the side of the MRV, then back around to the other side. But it was completely blocking the gates. Gates that were too high to climb.
We gotta stop the detonation,
Irvine said when it became obvious they couldn't get out. But, as they ran back, they discovered, to their horror, that the door leading in the facility had auto-locked from the outside in an effort to prevent those who might not know about the self-destruction from entering into the dangerous area.
What?
Selfie stepped back and ran across the parking lot, looking around. There was a high wall surrounding them on all sides. And a fence separating them from the launch platforms. There was nowhere to go. She slowed down to a halt as the implications of that hit her. They were locked in. The groaning of the launchers beyond the tall chain-link fence caught her eye. Selfie collapsed down to her knees as the missiles launched from the doomed facility. They could do nothing more but watch the smoke trail left behind as they raced into the sky. Squall would take care of the rest, right? Selfie could count on him to protect the garden. Right?
It came quite quietly,
Quistis said from behind her, her voice soft and sad.
I thought the end would have been more dramatic.
Squall.
He didn't trust me,
Irvine sighed.
That's probably why he put me in this team. He didn't care if I was lost.
What were they talking about? Selfie frowned as her head hung low. Squall would have chosen them because he believed in them. Because he was confident they were the right ones to get the job done. That's what he had thought when he made up this team. She was more devastated because she had failed despite that trust.
Hey, guys,
Irvine called out, his voice thick with emotion.
There's something I really need to tell you before. I just can't go without you knowing the truth.
Selfie screamed as the first explosions threw her forward against the ground. The bite of concrete against her cheek made her grimace. The second explosion rocked the MRV and sent a couple of its parts falling to the ground. Selfie's heart was racing to the point of breaking as she looked up. The fifth explosion was the largest, the result of the power core discharging all of its stored energy and hitting the remaining missiles in storage. A large plume of black smoke blocked out the sky as the facility was destroyed. End of chapter.